In the quiet suburb of Willow Creek, where manicured lawns hid the sharpest knives, lived Alexander and Elena Harrington, the couple everyone envied. He was the brilliant cardiothoracic surgeon with the million-dollar smile. She was the elegant former ballerina who had given up the stage to become the perfect doctor's wife. They had the colonial house with the wraparound porch, the his and hers luxury cars, the annual Christmas card that looked like a magazine cover, and they had a secret. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Alexander took out a $10 million life insurance policy on Elena. "Darling," he said, kissing her forehead, "I never want you to worry if something happens to me." She smiled back, eyes soft. "Till death do us part, Alex." What Elena never told anyone, not her friends, not her therapist, not even the private investigator she hired 6 months later, was that she had started tasting metal in her morning coffee. Her hair was falling out in clumps. She was exhausted after climbing 12 stairs. The doctors called it unexplained anemia. Alexander called it stress and prescribed more vitamins, always mixed by his own steady surgeon's hands. Then came the affair. Sophia, 28, blonde, ambitious nurse from his OR team. She wanted the lifestyle Elena had built. Alexander wanted the thrill Elena no longer gave him. They met in on-call rooms, 5-star hotels paid in cash, and finally in the lakeside cabin he bought under a shell company. He told Sophia the plan: 1 champagne-soaked night, 6 more months. The poison is slow, undetectable. By the time anyone notices, it'll look like organ failure. $10 million, baby. We'll never have to work again. Sophia giggled and raised her glass. "Till death do us part." But Elena had stopped being the trusting wife the day she found the thallium sulfate hidden behind his golf clubs. She had already switched the insurance policies, his name for hers, quietly, legally, months earlier. She had already built a new life under a new name in a city 3,000 miles away. And she had already replaced the poison with something far more poetic. On the night Alexander finally decided to finish the job, slipping the lethal dose into Elena's favorite chamomile tea, she kissed him goodnight, whispered "I'll love you forever," and watched him take the first sip from the same cup to prove it was safe. The ambulance arrived 23 minutes later. The doctors fought for hours. But thallium is unforgiving, especially when the dose is meant for a much smaller woman. Elena stood at his bedside in the ICU, veiled, elegant, untouched. She placed white lily on the tray table, his favorite get-well flowers, and leaned close to his ear as the machines flatlined. "Till death do us part, darling," she whispered. "I win." The first time Elena tasted the faint metallic tang in her coffee, she thought it was the new espresso machine Alexander had surprised her with. "Only the best for my ballerina," he'd said, kissing her temple like he used to when they were still newlyweds, and he hadn't yet grown tired of her silences. That was 18 months ago. Now, standing in the marble kitchen of their $6 million Willow Creek Colonial, Elena stared at the lab report trembling in her manicured hand. Thallium, undetectable in small doses. Fatal in larger ones. The toxicologist had circled the numbers in red and written one word: intentional. Alexander was upstairs in the shower, humming the way he always did after a long surgery off-key, triumphant, alive. She could hear the water drumming against the Italian tile they had chosen together on their honeymoon in Tuscany. She folded the report into a perfect square, slipped it into the hidden pocket of her yoga leggings, and began to plan. She started keeping a diary. Not the leather-bound one on her nightstand that Alexander sometimes flipped through with a bored smile, a real one. Encrypted on a burner laptop hidden inside the hollowed-out complete works of Shakespeare in the library he never entered. Every symptom, every strange new bruise, every time he insisted on making her tea himself. "Because you work too hard, darling." She dated every entry. She photographed every vial she found behind his golf clubs in the garage clear liquid, and marked, "Lethal." She did not cry, not once. Instead, she hired the best corporate attorney in Boston, the one famous for making billionaires weep in deposition rooms. She met him in the back of a blacked-out SUV wearing huge sunglasses and a baseball cap. She transferred assets Alexander didn't even know existed, family money from a grandmother he dismissed as some old dancer. She set up trusts in the Cayman Islands. She bought a penthouse in Manhattan under the name Elena Volkov, the stage name she had buried when she married him. Then she did the most dangerous thing of all. She switched the insurance policies. It took 3 visits to the insurance office, a forged power of attorney she paid a disgraced notary $50,000 to create, and one terrified junior agent who thought he was helping a dying woman update her paperwork. $10 million, double indemnity for accidental death. Beneficiary, Elena M. Harrington. Insured, Alexander J. Harrington. She timed it perfectly. The new policy went active the same week Alexander booked a medical conference in Aspen with Sophia the blonde scrub nurse who called him Dr. Sexy loud enough for the entire Or gallery to hear. Elena smiled when he kissed her goodbye at the airport. "Have fun, darling," she said. "I'll miss you." While he was gone, she replaced the thallium with distilled water, every vial. Then she waited. Alexander came home tanned and smug, smelling of someone else's perfume. He made her chamomile tea that night the way he always did, 2 spoons of honey, a dash of milk, his back to her so she couldn't see what he added. She sipped it slowly, watching him watch her. "You look tired, love," he said, stroking her hair. "Maybe you should see Dr. Patel again. All those blood tests, we need to get to the bottom of this." "I think I'm getting better," she lied, and leaned her head against his chest so he wouldn't see her eyes. For the next 4 months she played the perfect declining wife. She lost 12 pounds she didn't need to lose. She let her hairdresser add subtle gray streaks for a more sophisticated look. She stopped wearing the red lipstick he once said made her look like a whore. She left the lab reports where he would find them, creatine levels climbing, liver enzymes screaming, the slow, elegant countdown. And she waited for him to decide it was time. It happened on a Tuesday in late October. The leaves were blood red, the air crispy enough to sting. Alexander came home early, loosened his tie, and poured them both a glass of the 1980 to Bordeaux they were saving for their 15th anniversary. "I made you tea," he said softly. "Your favorite." The cup steamed on the counter between them, innocent and fragrant. Chamomile, honey, milk, and this time enough thallium to kill a horse. He watched her lift it to her lips. Elena paused. "Aren't you having any?" "I'm more of a coffee guy tonight." He smiled, that charming surgeon's smile that had once made her knees weak. She pretended to take a long sip, then set the cup down and sighed. "I'm suddenly so thirsty," she murmured, and reached for his wine glass instead. "Share with me?" Before he could protest, she pressed the Bordeaux to his lips, tilting it the way lovers do in movies. He drank to humor her, 1 swallow, 2. Then she kissed him deep, slow, the way she hadn't kissed him in years. While their mouths were still fused, she switched the cups with the practiced grace of the ballerina she used to be. When she finally pulled away, her eyes were shining. "Till death do us part, Alex." He drank the tea without tasting anything but victory. The ambulance lights painted the Colonial's white columns red and blue over and over, like a horror disco. Elena stood barefoot on the cold porch in her silk nightgown, hair perfect, face pale but composed. She had rehearsed this moment for months. "Ma'am, step back." The paramedics shouted as they wheeled Alexander out on the gurney. His lips were already turning the telltale blue-gray of thallium's final kiss. Foam flecked the corner of his mouth. His eyes, those famous surgeon's eyes that could find a bleeding artery in the dark, locked on her, wide, pleading, finally understanding. "Elena," he rasped, voice barely a whisper through the oxygen mask. "Help me." She knelt beside him on the wet grass, took his hand like a devoted wife, and squeezed it gently. "Darling, the doctors will take good care of you." She leaned close enough for only him to hear. "You taught me everything I know about slow poisons, remember? I was always your best student." His body arched off the stretcher. The heart monitor screened its single, endless note. By the time they reached Willow Creek General, the very hospital where Alexander was once chief of cardiothoracic surgery he was coding, The team worked on him for 43 minutes. They pumped him full of Prussian blue charcoal hemodialysis. They cracked his chest and massaged his heart by hand. Sophia, the blonde nurse who had been on call, stood frozen in the doorway in her pink scrubs, mascara running, whispering no, no, no like a broken doll. Elena sat in the family room in a cashmere cardigan someone had draped over her shoulders, sipping hospital coffee from a paper cup. She had already called the insurance company from the ladies' room and confirmed the double indemnity clause was active. She had already texted her pilot, "Wheels up at dawn." She had already deleted the encrypted diary and smashed the burner laptop with a hammer in the garage sink. At 3:17 a.m., the attending physician Alexander's former protege came out, cap in hand. "Mrs. Harrington, I'm so sorry. We did everything we could." The toxin it was massive. His organs just shut down. Elena let exactly 3 tears fall. "Perfect, crystalline, Oscar-worthy. Thank you, doctor," she whispered. He was my whole world. The funeral was obscene in its opulence. Half the city showed up, colleagues, grateful patients, society wives clutching pearls. Sophia sat in the back row in black velvet, eyes swollen shut, clutching a single white rose. Elena wore a custom veil so thick no one could see her face. She read the eulogy herself, voice trembling just enough. "Alexander taught me that the heart is a fragile thing. That love can be fatal if you're not careful. That sometimes the person holding the scalpel is the one who cuts deepest." She paused, letting the silence stretch until it hurt. "I will miss him every day for the rest of my life." The will reading was held 10 days later in the oak-paneled office of Alexander's estate lawyer. Sophia was there, clutching a tissue, expecting the promised apartment in Miami and the settlement Alexander had bragged about. His brother flew in from London. His mother dabbed her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. The lawyer cleared his throat. "To my wife, Elena Marie Harrington, I leave my entire estate, real property, investments, retirement accounts, life insurance proceeds totaling approximately $48 million after taxes." Sophia gasped, "But he promised me." The lawyer didn't even look up. "Miss Ling receives the 2021 Mercedes G-Wagon registered in Dr. Harrington's name and the balance of his wardrobe." Sophia lunged across the table. Security escorted her out while she screamed that it was a mistake, that Alexander had loved her, that Elena was a cold bitch who'd never deserved him. Elena signed the papers with a Mont Blanc pen Alexander had given her on their 5th anniversary. The same pen he'd used to sign the fake love letters he left for Sophia to find. That night, alone in the mansion that was now truly hers, Elena poured herself a glass of the 1980 to Bordeaux they never got to drink on their 15th anniversary. She walked upstairs to the master bedroom, opened Alexander's closet, and pulled out the navy cashmere sweater he wore the night he first poisoned her. She held it to her face, inhaled the ghost of his cologne, and smiled. Then she carried it to the marble fireplace, struck a match, and watched $15,000 burn to ash. 3 months later, Elena was gone. The Willow Creek mansion sold at auction for $9 million cash to a tech couple from San Francisco who wanted to flip it for content. Elena didn't attend the closing. She was already living in the penthouse on Central Park West, 47 floors above the city that never mourned anyone for long. The walls were white, the art was Basquiat and Banksy, and the only photograph on display was one of her at 19 mid-pirouette, ribs showing, eyes already ancient. She changed her name legally to Elena Volkov, cut her hair into a sharp black bob, and started taking meetings with Hollywood producers who wanted the rights to the Black Widow of Willow Creek. She turned them all down. Some stories, she decided, were better as rumors. Sophia tried to fight the will. She hired a sleazy lawyer who specialized in wronged mistresses and held tearful press conferences on the courthouse steps, clutching Alexander's stethoscope like a holy relic. The tabloids ate it up for 2 weeks. Then the toxicology report leaked sealed court documents somehow emailed to every major outlet. Thallium levels off the charts. A handwritten note in Alexander's desk. He refuses to die. increased dose, Sophia's press conferences stopped, her Instagram went private. Last anyone heard, she was bartending in Myrtle Beach under her middle name. Elena flew to Paris for Fashion Week, sat front row at Dior in a backless black gown that cost more than most people's houses. Photographers screamed her name Volkov, Volkov. Not knowing it was the same woman who once pushed a grocery cart through Willow Creek in yoga pants and a ponytail. She let them take her picture. She even smiled. One night in March, 6 months after the funeral, her doorman buzzed up. "There's a woman here to see you, Ms. Volkov. Says it's urgent." Name's Sophia Lang. Elena considered telling him to send her away. Instead, she said, "Send her up." Sophia looked smaller, without the spotlight. No extensions, no filler, no filter. She stood in the marble foyer clutching a manila envelope, eyes red from crying or cocaine. Elena couldn't tell which. "You destroyed my life," Sophia spat. Elena poured 2 fingers of Yamazaki 18 and handed her one. "Drank," Sophia drank. "I'm pregnant," she said finally, voice cracking. 7 weeks, it's Alexander's. Elena didn't flinch. "Congratulations, I have nothing. No insurance, no savings. He promised me everything and you took it all." "I didn't take anything that wasn't already mine," Elena said calmly. "But I'll give you something, one-time offer." She walked to the safe hidden behind a mirrored panel, entered the code, and pulled out a cashier's check. $5 million, made out to Sophia Lang. Sophia stared at it like it might bite her. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Elena said. "Sign the NDA, get an abortion, or don't. I don't care. Disappear. Never speak my name, his name, or Willow Creek again. Or I release the rest of the files, the texts where you helped him pick the poison, the video from the lake house where you toasted to my death. Your choice." Sophia's hand shook as she took the check. "You're a monster." Elena smiled, slow and lethal. "No, darling. I'm the widow." Sophia left without another word. The elevator doors closed on her sobs. That summer, Elena met Luca on a yacht in Capri, 34, Italian, old money that smelled like salt and secrets. Didn't he know her story and didn't he Google it? He was too busy tracing the faint scar on her ribcage where the thallium had caused a mysterious bleed years ago. They married in Positano at sunset, just 12 guests, no phones allowed. She wore vintage Schiaparelli the color of fresh cream. When the priest asked if anyone objected, the only sound was the sea. On their wedding night, Luca poured champagne and asked, laughing, "Any crazy ex-husbands I should worry about?" Elena touched the rim of her glass to his. "Only dead ones." They honeymooned for 3 months. Mykonos, Marrakesh, Kyoto. She learned to sleep without checking the locks 17 times. She learned to laugh without calculating exits. She learned that some hearts, once broken, can be remade stronger. 1 year to the day after Alexander's death, Elena returned to Willow Creek alone. The new owners had painted the colonial sage green and added a koi pond. She stood at the gates in sunglasses and a trench coat, holding a single white lily. She laid it on the spot where he'd collapsed on the grass. Then she took out her phone, opened the banking app, and donated the remaining $28 million, every cent of the insurance money, to a foundation for victims of domestic poisoning. Anonymous donor, no plaque, no recognition. As she walked back to the waiting car, her driver asked, "Everything okay, Mrs. Rossi?" She rolled the window down and let the autumn air hit her face. "Everything," she said, "is perfect." And for the first time in a decade, she meant it. Years later, when the tabloids had finally grown bored of the poisoned widow and moved on to fresher tragedies, Elena Rossi, once Harrington, once Volkov, once simply the girl who could balance and point until her toes bled, stood on the terrace of her villa in Lake Como and watched the sun bleed into the water. Luca was inside, arguing good-naturedly with their chef about the correct way to finish a risotto. Their daughter, Katerina, 3 years old and fearless, was chasing fireflies with a net twice her size. The sound of her laughter floated up the stone steps like music Elena had forgotten existed. She still woke sometimes at 3:17 a.m., the exact minute Alexander's heart had stopped. She would sit bolt upright, tasting metal that wasn't there, feeling phantom bruises bloom across her ribs. Luca learned not to ask. He simply pulled her back down, wrapped his arms around the places the poison had touched, and held her until morning. The foundation she had created with Alexander's blood money had saved 4,837 lives. Women who tasted metal in their tea, wives who found hidden vials, girlfriends who noticed their hair thinning in the shower. Elena read every thank you letter. She kept them in a cedar box in her study, tied with a black ribbon. On the days when the ghosts grew loud, she opened the box and read until the words blurred. She never went back to Willow Creek again. The tech couple who bought the house turned it into an influencer retreat, white couches, ring lights in every room, a podcast studio where Alexander's old library used to be. They had no idea that the faint stain on the marble kitchen island wasn't red wine. They had no idea that the fireplace in the master bedroom still smelled faintly of burnt cashmere on damp days. Sophia took the $5 million and vanished. Some say she moved to Costa Rica and opened a yoga retreat. Others say she overdosed in a Miami motel and was buried in an unmarked grave. Elena never checked. Some doors, once closed, are meant to stay that way. On the 5th anniversary of Alexander's death, Elena received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, the white lily she had left on the lawn in Willow Creek, now pressed flat and brittle between two sheets of glass. On the back, in handwriting she hadn't seen in half a decade, 3 words, "Till death do us part." She burned the photograph in the terrace fireplace, watched the flames curl the edges black, and scattered the ashes into the lake. Katerina ran up then, cheeks flushed, holding a firefly cupped in her tiny hands. "Look, Mama, it's magic." Elena knelt, kissed her daughter's sticky forehead, and opened her palms. The firefly lifted into the night, a small green spark against the dark. "Yes, tesoro," she whispered. "It is." She never tasted metal again. Some marriages end in courtrooms, some end in quiet conversations over breakfast. And some only a very few end with one spouse watching the other take the last sip of something that was never meant for them. Elena Rossi lived another 42 years. She danced at her daughter's wedding. She held her grandchildren on her lap and told them fairy tales about brave ballerinas who outsmarted wicked kings. She grew old gracefully, silver hair to her waist, eyes still sharp enough to cut glass. When she died at 91, peacefully in her sleep with Luca's hand in hers, the obituary in La Repubblica called her a philanthropist, a patron of the arts, a devoted wife and mother. It did not mention Willow Creek. It did not mention Thallium. It did not mention the $10 million that had bought freedom for thousands. At her funeral, Katerina, now a surgeon herself, placed a single white lily on the casket. And somewhere, in whatever place called men go when their time is up, Alexander Harrington finally understood the real meaning of forever. Till death do us part. Elena had simply made sure it was his death and their parting, and she had lived happily ever after. The first time Katerina asked about her father's scar, she was 7. They were in the Via's kitchen, flour on their cheeks, making gnocchi the way Luca's Nona had taught them. Katerina's small finger traced the faint silver line that ran along Elena's left ribcage, visible above the neckline of her linen sundress. "Why do you have a lightning bolt, Mama?" Elena's hands stilled on the dough. For a moment the only sound was the lake lapping against the stone seawall outside. "It's not a lightning bolt, amor," she said softly. "It's a reminder." "Of what?" "That some people tried to break you," Elena said, pressing the dough into perfect little pillows, "and you let them think they have. Right up until the moment you break them instead." Katerina giggled, thinking it was a game. Elena kissed the top of her dark curls and changed the subject to how many sage leaves they should fry in brown butter. She never told her daughter the full truth, not at 7. Not at 17, when Katerina came home from university with a boyfriend who just liked to grab a little too hard when he was drunk. Elena took one look at the fingerprint bruises on her daughter as our man booked them both on the next flight to New York. She sat Katerina down in the same Central Park West penthouse where she had once counted poison drops and told her everything. Every vial, every switched cup, every second of watching Alexander die. When she finished, Katerina was pale but steady-eyed. "You killed him," she whispered. "I survived him," Elena corrected. There's a difference. That night, Katerina deleted her boyfriend's number, changed the locks on her flat, and enrolled in medical school cardiology. She said she wanted to understand hearts, the ones that stop, the ones that refuse to. Years later, when Katerina was chief of cardiothoracic surgery at a hospital in Milan, a patient was rushed in, 58-year-old man, acute thallium poisoning, rare, almost unheard of in 2047. The wife sat in the waiting room wringing her hands, claiming he must have ingested rat poison by accident. Katerina recognized the symptoms immediately. She recognized the wife's performance too. She saved the husband's life barely. Then she walked into the private room where the wife waited, closed the door, and slid a single white lily across the table. "Get out of my hospital," Katerina said quietly. "Take the next train to Switzerland. There's a clinic in Zurich that will help you disappear." My mother has already paid. The wife's eyes filled with tears, real ones this time. "How did you know?" Katerina smiled the same slow, lethal smile Elena had perfected decades earlier. "Because my mother taught me that some dances only end when one partner stops breathing. She chose life. I suggest you do the same." The wife left that night. The husband woke up alone, confused, alive. He never saw her again. When Katerina called her mother to tell her, Elena was 90, sitting on the same Como terrace where she had once scattered Alexander's ashes into the wind. Her hair was snow white now, her hands papery and veined, but her eyes were still sharp enough to cut glass. "You did well, Tesoro," she said, voice soft over the phone. "I was afraid," Katerina admitted. "Good," Elena replied. "Fear keeps you precise." There was a long pause, filled only by the sound of water and memory. "Mama," Katerina said finally, "do you regret any of it?" Elena looked out at the lake, glittering gold in the late afternoon light. She thought of Alexander's blue lips, of the taste of metal that had finally left her tongue, of Luca's arms around her every night for 40 years, of Katerina chasing fireflies. Of 4,837 women who had lived because she had not died. No, she said simply. Not a single second. She died 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday in October, the leaves blood red, the air crispy enough to sting. Luca was holding her hand. Katerina was on her way from Milan. Her last words were not profound, they were practical. "White Lily," she whispered to Luca, "only one. And tell Katerina. The dance is hers now." They buried her on a hill overlooking the lake, beneath a cypress tree that had stood for 300 years. No eulogy, no tears in public. Just family, the wind, and the quiet certainty that some stories don't need telling, they only need living. On the headstone, engraved in simple script, Elena Rossi dancer, wife, mother, survivor, she chose the music, she led. And somewhere, in the place where cold men wait, Alexander Harrington finally stopped reaching for a teacup that would never come. "Till death do us part." She had kept her vow, the right death. The perfect parting. And every woman who tasted nettle in her tea afterward knew, somewhere deep in her bones, that the dance was not over. It had only changed partners. In the spring of 2061, 14 years after Elena's death, Katerina Rossi stood in the same Milan courtroom where her mother had once signed away a name she never wanted again. Katerina was 40 now, hair pulled back severely, white coat exchanged for a black suit that cost more than most people's cars. She was testifying before a parliamentary commission on domestic poisoning laws. Thallium is odorless, tasteless, and still perfectly legal to purchase in industrial quantities, she said, voice steady as a scalpel. Rat poison regulations haven't been updated since 1983. We are handing murderers a loaded gun and calling it pest control. The senators shifted uncomfortably. One tried to interrupt with budget concerns. Katerina clicked a remote, and the screen behind her filled with photographs. Women with bald patches, women with blue gums, women who looked like Elena in the months before the switch. My mother was one of the lucky ones, Katerina said. Most aren't. She didn't tell them that the night before, she had received another envelope. Same handwriting, same pressed white lily. Same 3 words. Till death do us part. This time there was a photograph inside. Katerina's daughter, Lucia, age 9, walking out of school in Como, backpack swinging, unaware of the long lens that had captured her. The message was clear. Someone was still dancing. Katerina didn't flinch. She had been waiting for this. That night she flew to New York, to the cedar box her mother had left her in the will. Inside were the thank you letters, the black ribbon, and one final envelope Katerina had never opened. Elena's handwriting on the front, for when they come back. She tore it open. Inside was a single USB drive and a note. If you're reading this, Tesoro, then the music never stopped. The lily is Alexander's mother. She knows. She always knew. She paid for the thallium. She taught him how. She's old now, but old wolves still have teeth. And the dance. All my love, Mama Katerina plugged the drive into her laptop. Bank records, emails, a video of a 78-year-old woman in a Connecticut nursing home bragging to an undercover nurse about teaching that Russian horror lesson. DNA results linking the original thallium batch to a garden shed in Greenwich. 1998, enough to put Eleanor Harrington away for life. If she lived that long, Katerina booked the red-eye to Boston. She found Eleanor in a private suite that smelled of lavender and decay, oxygen tubes in her nose, eyes still sharp as winter. You look just like her, Eleanor rasped when Katerina walked in. The devil's spawn. Katerina placed the white lily on the bedside table. I'm not here to arrest you, she said quietly. I'm here to offer you a choice. She laid out the evidence like surgical instruments. Prison at your age is a death sentence, slow, public, painful, or... She placed a small glass vial next to the lily. Clear liquid, and marked, you finish the dance yourself. Quietly, tonight, I wait outside. When it's done, the file disappears. Your name stays clean. Your grandchildren never know what their grandmother was. Eleanor stared at the vial for a long time. He was supposed to be stronger, she whispered finally. He was my perfect boy. He was a monster, Katerina said. And you built him. Eleanor's hand trembled as she reached for the vial. Will you tell her I'm sorry? Katerina thought of her mother on the terrace, scattering ashes into the lake. No, she said, but I'll tell her it's over. She stepped into the hallway. Closed the door, waited. 23 minutes later, the monitors flatlined. The nurse found Mrs. Eleanor Harrington dead of natural causes at 81. The vial was gone. The lily wilted overnight. Katerina flew home to Como. She stood on the terrace where her mother had once watched sunsets and scattered more ashes than anyone would ever know. She opened her hand and let the last pressed lily drift into the wind. Somewhere below, 9-year-old Lucia was taking her first ballet lesson, pink slippers too big, arms reaching for something she couldn't yet name. Katerina watched her granddaughter leap awkward, fearless, alive. The music had finally stopped. Till death do us part. 3 deaths. 3 generations, 1 perfect parting. And the dance, at last, belonged only to the living. Lucia Rossi was 12 when she found the cedar box. She had been looking for her grandmother's old point shoes, the ones Katerina swore were cursed because every dancer who wore them after Elena had snapped an Achilles. Instead, tucked behind a false panel in the attic of the Como villa, she found the box tied with a black ribbon gone gray with age. Inside were thousands of letters. Thank yous from women in 23 languages. Photographs of children who would never know their mothers had almost died from metal in their tea. And at the very bottom, beneath everything, a single USB drive labeled in Elena's elegant handwriting, "For the last dancer." Lucia waited until her mother was on call in Milan. Then she plugged it into her laptop. The drive opened to one video file. Elena appeared on screen, 90 years old, sitting on the terrace at sunset, white hair glowing like a halo. She looked straight into the camera the way she once looked into Alexander's eyes the night he drank the tea. If you're watching this, little one, then the story has come to you. Good stories like ours are not meant to die with us. They are meant to be weapons. She told Lucia everything, not the polished version Katerina had given her daughter. No softened edges. No, your great-grandmother was complicated. The raw truth, the poison, the switch, the old woman in Connecticut, the Lila that were never about mourning. When the video ended, Elena leaned closer to the lens. One day, someone will try to hurt you because of what we did. Because some men and the women who raised them cannot stand to lose. When that day comes, remember 3 things. She held up one finger. First, never drink anything you didn't pour yourself. Second finger. Second, love is the only poison with an antidote, and its name is choice. Third finger. Third, the dance is yours now. Lead. The screen went black. Lucia closed the laptop, heart hammering so hard she thought the lake could hear it. 3 weeks later, on her 13th birthday, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, a single white lily and a note in handwriting that matched the ones her mother had burned years ago. Happy birthday, little dancer. See you opening night. Lucia didn't cry. She didn't tell her mother. She took the lily, walked down to the water, and let it float away like her great-grandmother had taught the wine to do. Then she started training ballet at dawn, Krav Maga at dusk, toxicology electives when she started university at 16. By 25, she was the youngest principal dancer at La Scala and the silent partner in a private security firm that specialized in extracting women from husbands who preferred them dead to divorced. She never married. She kept lovers the way Elena kept secrets, beautifully, temporarily, and always with an exit strategy. At 32, the invitation arrived, a gala performance in Monaco. All proceeds to cardiac research. Ironic, considering. Front and center seat reserved in her name, paid for by a donor who wished to remain anonymous. Lucia knew before she even opened the card who it would be from. She wore red, blood red. The dress had a slit to the thigh and pockets deep enough for a syringe. Backstage, after the performance, standing ovation. 15 curtain calls. Roses ankle deep. A man approached, tall, mid-40s. Alexander's eyes. Eleanor's mouth. The grandson no one had ever spoken of because he'd been hidden away in boarding schools while his father planned murders. He extended a hand. Brilliant performance, Miss Rossi. My family has followed your career with particular interest. Lucia smiled the way Elena had smiled the night of the chamomile tea. How kind, she said, and you are. Someone who believes some dances should have ended decades ago. He offered her a flute of champagne from a passing tray. She took it, held it to the light, saw the faint metallic sheen only for generations of Rossi women would recognize. Lucia raised the glass in toast to old times, she said. He clinked his untouched glass against hers. She pretended to sip. Then, with the same effortless grace she used to execute 32 fouettes, she switched their glasses mid-turn, the way Elena had once switched teacups. He drank. 23 minutes later, in the ambulance racing toward Princess Grace Hospital, he clawed at the oxygen mask, eyes bulging with the same realization his grandfather had died wearing. Lucia sat beside him, veil of black lace over her face like the widow she never became. Till death do us part, she whispered, and placed a single white lily on his chest. The monitors flatlined under the Monaco stars. Lucia walked out of the hospital into the dawn, red dress catching the first light like fresh blood. She didn't look back, for generations, for deaths. One vow kept in ways no priest could ever imagine. The music finally, truly, eternally stopped. And somewhere, Elena Rossi 91 in the ground, forever 30 in the mirror of memory smiled. The dance was over. The dancers were free. Lucia never kept the lily. She let the Mediterranean take it, petals scattering like white ashes across black water. Then she walked back into the casino lights of Monte Carlo, as if she had simply stepped out for a cigarette. No one noticed the principal dancer of La Scala had just ended a bloodline that began with a surgeon's steady hand and a mother-in-law's hatred. She resigned from the company the next morning. The director begged, offered triple salary, named a new studio after her. Lucia kissed him on both cheeks, left her pointe shoes on the rehearsal floor, and disappeared. For 5 years, no one knew where she went. Rumors, Bhutan, Patagonia, a silent monastery in Kyoto. The truth was simpler. She came home. To the villa on Lake Como where Elena had once watched fireflies with a child who would never know how close the dark had come. Lucia poured every euro of her earnings into the foundation her mother and great-grandmother had started. She renamed it the White Lily Project. No press, no galas, just a phone number, a private jet on standby, and an army of women who had once been dancers, lawyers, chemists, assassins, all of them survivors. They worked in silence, a wife in Dubai who woke up bald, a fiancé in São Paulo whose blood tests didn't lie, a duchess in London whose tea tasted of pennies. One by one they vanished from their gilded cages and reappeared in new cities with new names and bank accounts fat enough to never need a man again. Lucia never danced in public again, but every year on the anniversary of Monaco she danced alone on the terrace, barefoot, red dress. 32 fouettes without a spotter, perfect, vicious, defiant. Then she poured a single glass of champagne onto the stones for the dead who had tried to kill them all. On the 10th anniversary, a girl arrived at the villa gates. 16, shaking, clutching a backpack and a plane ticket paid for by a stranger. Her left arm was a map of bruises shaped like fingerprints. "They said you help people like me," she whispered in broken Italian. Lucia looked at her for a long time. "What's your name?" "Doesn't matter anymore." Lucia smiled the way for generations of Rossi women had smiled right before the music stopped. "Then come inside," she said. "We'll give you a new one." She led the girl past the cypress tree where Elena was buried, past the terrace where Caterina had scattered the last press lily, into the villa that had become more fortress than home. In the library, Lucia opened the cedar box now empty except for one thing. She took out a single pair of worn satin point shoes, ribbons faded to the color of old blood. "These belong to my great-grandmother," she said. "She killed a man with grace. My grandmother saved lives with precision. My mother ended a war no one ever declared." "Now it's your turn." The girl stared at the shoes like they might bite. "I can't dance," she said. Lucia knelt, slipped the shoes onto the girl's feet, and tied the ribbons tight. "None of us could," she said, "until we had to." Years later, when Lucia was 60 and the girl now a woman known only as Bianca ran the European division of the White Lily Project, another envelope arrived. No lily this time, just a photograph of the Como villa taken from the lake at dawn. On the back, in handwriting Lucia had never seen, "The music is over. Thank you for the final note. No signature, no threat. Just peace." Lucia burned the photograph in the same fireplace where Elena had once burned $15,000 of cashmere. She watched the flames curl the edges black, then scatter the ashes into the wind. That night she danced one last time on the terrace. Not 32 fouettes, just a simple bury across the stones, slow and weightless, the way Elena had moved the night she switched the cups. When she finished, she was crying not from sadness, but from the exquisite relief of a story that had finally truly ended. The next morning, Lucia Rossi closed the villa gates, donated the entire estate to the foundation, and walked down to the lake with nothing but the clothes on her back and the faint scars her lovers used to trace like constellations. She bought a small boat, painted it red, and sailed south. No one ever saw her again. But on certain nights, When the moon is full and the water is glass, fishermen swear they see a woman in a red dress dancing on the waves barefoot, untouchable, eternal. They say if you're running from someone who wants you dead, you should follow the red boat. They say if you leave a single white lily on the shore, she will come. They say the dance never really ends. It just changes partners till death do us part. And for the Rossi women Elena, Caterina, Lucia, and all the daughters who came after, death was never the end. It was only the curtain call. Decades drifted like lake mist after Lucia vanished into the south. The villa became headquarters, then legend, then myth. The White Lily Project grew roots that spanned continents, safe houses in Marrakesh Casbahs, coded knock doors in Tokyo subway stations, a fishing trawler off Iceland that only answered to women's voices. The cedar box was gone, burned with the last envelope. But the story refused to die. In 2117, a girl named Aria arrived at the gates in Como, 20 years old. Hair shaved to the scalp from the poison, eyes too old for her face. She carried nothing but a data chip hidden in the lining of her shoe and a single white lily she had grown herself in a prison greenhouse. I was told, she said to the woman who opened the gate, that this is where the music stops. The woman who answered was 93, spine bent like a question mark, walking with two canes carved from olive wood. Her face was a map of every year the Rossi women had stolen back from death. Music never stops, the old woman replied. It only changes key. She led Aria inside, past portraits that no longer had names, only dates and lily painted in the corners. The old woman sat the girl at the long cypress table where Elena had once planned a murder over chamomile and honey. My name is Sophia, she said. Lucia was my mother, Caterina my grandmother. Elena my great-great-grandmother. You are the next. Aria placed the data chip on the table. There's a new poison, synthetic, faster than thallium, no taste, no antidote. They're selling it on the dark markets as eternal sleep, for wives who won't stay quiet. For daughters who inherit too much, Sophia closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were the same winter blue as the woman who had once watched a surgeon die on wet grass. Then we learned the new steps, she said. They worked for 7 years, chemists in hidden labs under vineyards. Hackers in windowless rooms lit by lily-white screens. Former ballerinas whose feet still remembered 32 ways to kill a man with a single turn. On the 100th anniversary of Alexander Harrington's death, October 23, 2124, Sophia, now 100, skin translucent as rice paper, gathered every operative the project had ever saved. Thousands linked by hologram, from Antarctic research stations to Martian colony domes. She raised a single white lily grown in hydroponic soil under red dust light. Tonight, she said, voice steady as the first Elena's had been the night she switched the cups. We ended forever. At exactly 3:17 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, the antidote flooded every dark market on Earth and beyond. Free, open source, intraceable, labeled only with a single line, till death do us part. We choose the parting. By morning, eternal sleep was worthless. The men who sold it woke to empty accounts and doors kicked in by women they thought they had silenced. Some ran, some swallowed their own product. None were ever seen again. Sophia died that same night, peacefully, lily still clutched in her hand. They carried her body to the lake at dawn, no casket. Just a red silk dress laid over her like the one Lucia had worn in Monaco. They set the small boat alight with a single match. As the flames rose, every woman present, millions now, watching from every corner of the settled worlds, raised whatever they held. A coffee cup, a champagne flute, a hydroponic vial of water. They spoke in one voice, across languages and light years, till death do us part. Then they poured whatever they held into the nearest body of water, onto soil, into the recycled air of starships. The ashes drifted across the lake, caught the wind, and scattered north, south, east, west, upward into the thinning atmosphere where new colonies waited. The dance was finally, completely over. No more vials, no more lila, no more metal in the tea. Only the story remained, passed mouth to ear, mother to daughter, survivor to survivor. Once upon a time, a ballerina married a monster. She poisoned him with his own poison. Her daughters perfected the art of survival. Her great-granddaughters ended the war. And every woman who ever feared the taste of pennies in her morning coffee learned the steps by heart. They never needed another Elena. They never needed another Lucia. They became the music themselves, till death do us part. Death came only when they decided. The parting was always, always theirs. And somewhere, in the quiet between stars, for generations of Rossi women danced barefoot on the edge of everything, red dresses catching solar wind, laughing like fireflies, forever untouchable, forever alive. The end was only the beginning, and the lake on Como kept their secret, rippling gently under a sky full of daughters who would never again drink anything poured by cruel hands. The year is 2150. The White Lily Project no longer needs villas, boats, or secret terraces. It lives in the air itself, an open-source constellation of nanosatellites that detect synthetic thallium derivatives in real time, anywhere on Earth or off it. The antidote is free airborne in major cities, baked into every municipal water system from Lagos to Luna City. No one even remembers who started it. They only know that, for the first time in recorded history, no wife, no daughter, no lover has died of slow metal in her tea in over 75 years. The lake at Como has changed too. The water is clearer, the cypress taller. The villa long since dissolved into a public garden where schoolchildren come to learn about the woman who began it all. There is a single statue at the water's edge, not Elena, not Caterina, not Lucia, not Sophia. Just a dancer and point, arms flung wide, face tilted to the sky. No name, no dates, only an inscription in 100 languages. She chose the music. We learned the steps. On the anniversary of the great upload, the night the antidote went global, people still leave flowers. Not white lila, never white lila again. They leave red poppies, yellow mimosa, wild purple thistles, anything bright and impossible to poison. And every year, at exactly 3:17 a.m., the old church bell in the village rings once. No one winds it. No one installed electronics. It simply rings, the way hearts used to stop, and then didn't. The very last woman to carry the Rossi blood visits the garden only once. Her name is Lilibet, after no one and everyone. She is 137, kept gently alive by the same medicine that once would have been used to kill her. She walks with no cane, hair still black, because she refuses the graying Jean Maud. She stands before the statue, lays a single red poppy at its feet, and speaks to the wine the way her mother spoke to lakes and fireplaces and midnight boats. I kept the vow, she says, no more deaths. No more partings that weren't chosen. The wine answers with the faint rustle of 1,000 poppies left by 1,000 daughters who never had to switch the cup. Lilibet smiles, presses two fingers to her lips, and salutes the dancer who has no face. Then she walks to the edge of the water, steps into a small red boat that has waited a century for its final passenger, and rows herself into the sunrise. The boat is found hours later, empty, drifting in perfect circles. No body, no note. Only a single red dress folded neatly on the seat and, tucked into its pocket, the faded ribbon that once tied a cedar box full of thank you letters from women who lived. The garden keepers burn the dress that night in a small fire on the terrace. They scatter the ashes into the lake the way Elena scattered cashmere, Caterina scattered lila, Lucia scattered threats, Sophia scattered antidotes. And with that final scattering, the story ends, not because anyone forgot, but because no one ever had to tell it again till death do us part. Death came when it came gently on their own terms. The parting was always theirs, quiet, chosen, final, free. Somewhere beyond the edge of the solar wind, 5 women in red dresses dance barefoot across the stars. They have no audience but each other. They need no music but the hush between heartbeats that no longer fear the taste of metal. The dance is over. The dancers remain forever.